Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dev Diary. Now, recently we dipped our toes into merge games, which were introduced to me personally on a little excursion through modern mobile gaming. The initial concept was intriguing, but at the time the feeling was that the execution was poor due to having to rely on the usual mobile game tropes. And as a result, trying to figure out alternatives to those tropes became a goal. But before we get too far into things, remember to leave a like if you enjoyed today's video, and subscribe if you're new to the channel. Also, remember to turn on notifications so you don't miss future videos. Now, if you haven't seen our previous attempt at a merge game, I highly recommend watching that video first to get caught up to speed. For those of you who have seen it, well, this scene may look very familiar. Since our previous project was all done in a single object, this meant that with some tweaks to the original code, we could fit the entire merge game project into a single struct. Now, as simple as that sounds, it was not. But along with making this gigantic pile of code independent, it was also optimized and improved on. For example, unit spawns are now much more flexible. Specific positions can now be provided in addition to choosing a space at random. But the largest and most significant change to the code was the action function. Before, we just had a simple spawner that would create a single unit to merge, but for this test we've now got 3 different mergeable units in addition to the spawner. Now, before we get into those new units, let's talk about the player. Much like the merge games, the player is its own independent unit with its own variables, and most importantly, an array of data values. Now, these values directly relate to the player's stats. For the time being, those stats are for health, stamina, ammo, and fire rate. Now, I need to stress that this session was all about the data and figuring out how all the wires should be connected. As a result, we've got simple button presses to deplete health, stamina, and ammo to test how the merge aspect can influence the player's stats. So, as mentioned earlier, we've got a bunch of new units which, as I'm sure you've been able to piece together by now, relate to the player's stats. Hearts for health, green goo for the stamina, and bullets for ammo. And for testing purposes, pressing the spacebar spawns a random level 1 unit. And each unit merges as they should, but more interestingly, each level also has its own unit action. And as in the original, the spawner will spawn a level 1 goo somewhere on the board. The other units, however, will affect player stats. For example, clicking on the maxed out units will increase the max amount for that corresponding stat, whereas units not maxed out will simply replenish current corresponding stats. For example, a fully maxed out heart will increase the player's max HP by 10, but a non-maxed out heart will simply heal them for a couple of points. And regardless of the effect, this will consume that unit and remove it from the game. And all of these changes to the stats can be seen in real time based on the circle circling the lower left of the screen. For example, it only moves when it has stamina. The player can use stamina to move faster, and they can also fire their weapon, and when the player loses all of their health, their color changes. Now, despite all of the emphasis on the circle, this is not indicative of the actual game. Again, this is simply figuring out how to implement and encourage the merge gameplay through something other than, time-gated microtransactions. And the idea here is to use upgrading the player's stats as incentive to merge. And to see it work so buttery smooth with the player's stats in this fashion means implementing something more complicated and interesting should be possible. Fingers crossed. In other words, I don't intend the entire gameplay loop to simply rely on gaining levels through merging. So I think it's safe to say that we've now at least got a better idea of where to take things with this in the future. It's not a perfect system by any means, but as a proof of concept, I think it's pretty solid. Now, we've been on a kick of keeping things simple recently, but I think that this one deserves a bit more depth. Well, at least that's what I think. Do you think that we could keep players invested without complicating the system too much? Or are there better or more unique incentives that we should explore? Leave any and all thoughts in the comments. And as always, if you would like to play some previous games featured here on the channel or get early access to the weekly videos, subscribe to my Patreon. And with that said, brings us to the end of today's Dev Diary, so thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.